They thought my business was a joke. I bought the property next to them and built a rival empire. The scent of cinnamon and freshly baked bread used to fill Sarah's small bakery with a comforting warmth, a smell that whispered of dreams and hard work. But lately, that comforting aroma was tinged with a bitter undercurrent, a constant reminder of the booming laughter that echoed from the garish, neon-lit cafe next door. It was the laughter of Mr. Henderson and his smug crew, the owners of the Daily Grind, a sprawling, successful coffee chain that had been a fixture in their quiet town for years. They saw Sarah's little shop, Sarah's Sweet Delights, as nothing more than a whimsical, fleeting hobby, a pathetic attempt at entrepreneurship that they openly ridiculed. Their taunts, delivered with dripping condescension, were like small, sharp pebbles thrown at her carefully constructed world. They'd stand outside her window, pointing and chuckling, their voices loud enough for everyone to hear. "Look at that! A dollhouse bakery! She must think this is a fairy tale." Or, "Bet she's still using her grandma's recipes from the last century." What a joke! Sarah would clench her jaw, her knuckles white as she kneaded dough, trying to block out the noise, the constant barrage of negativity. It was more than just teasing. It felt like a deliberate attempt to undermine her spirit, to make her doubt herself, to push her out of the very community she was trying so hard to serve. Her customers, a loyal but small group who appreciated her handcrafted pastries and personal touch, were often subjected to the same treatment. They'd walk in, and the Hendersons' employees would make loud comments about slumming it or supporting the little guys who are destined to fail. It was demoralizing, not just for Sarah but for her few dedicated employees too, a young baker named Tom, who was eager to learn, and a friendly cashier named Maria, who always had a kind word for everyone. They were a small team, a family really, bound together by their belief in Sarah and her dream. But even their spirits were starting to fray under the relentless pressure. Sarah remembered the day she'd first opened Sarah's Sweet Delights. It had been a monumental achievement. Years of saving, of working double shifts at a dead-end job, of countless nights poring over business plans, and finally, there it was. A small, charming shopfront with a cheerful blue awning and a window filled with tempting treats. The town had seemed so welcoming at first. People admired her passion, her dedication to quality ingredients, and her innovative flavor combinations. She'd poured her heart and soul into every single cookie, every flaky croissant, every decadent slice of cake. She'd personally sourced the finest local butter, the richest chocolate, and the freshest fruits. She remembered painstakingly testing recipes, tweaking them until they were perfect, until they sang with flavor. Her signature item, a lavender-infused white chocolate scone, had quickly become a local favorite, a little piece of edible art that brought smiles to people's faces. The initial buzz had been fantastic. Local newspapers had featured her, calling her a breath of fresh air in the town's culinary scene. But then the Daily Grind had started to notice. Their initial response was dismissive. They saw her as a minor inconvenience, a blip on their radar. But as Sarah's Sweet Delights gained traction, as more people discovered the joy of her homemade goodness, their attitude shifted from condescension to outright hostility. Mr. Henderson, a portly man with a perpetually sneering expression and a loud, booming voice that seemed to fill the entire street, became her personal tormentor. He was a man who clearly believed in domination, in crushing any competition, no matter how small. He'd stroll past her shop daily, his expensive suit immaculate, his chin held high, and with a theatrical sigh, he'd make his pronouncements. "Honestly, Sarah, you're playing with house money. This isn't a real business. This is a hobby. And hobbies end, you know, especially when the real players arrive." He'd laugh, a harsh grating sound, and his employees, a team of young men and women who mirrored his arrogance, would join in, their laughter echoing Sarah's own mounting despair. The mockery was relentless. It wasn't just occasional comments. It was a daily, systematic campaign to belittle her efforts. Henderson would spread rumors, implying Sarah was struggling financially, that she was on the verge of bankruptcy. He'd tell potential suppliers that dealing with her was a waste of time, that she wouldn't be around for long. He even instructed his staff to offer significantly lower prices on their coffee and pastries, a deliberate attempt to undercut her, even though her offerings were completely different. Sarah's Sweet Delights focused on artisanal baked goods, using organic ingredients and unique flavor profiles, while the Daily Grind was all about mass-produced, standard fare. But Henderson didn't care about taste or quality. He cared about market share and crushing anyone who dared to exist in his shadow. He saw Sarah's success, however small, as an affront to his empire. He couldn't fathom that a small, independent business, run with passion and integrity, could actually appeal to people. He believed only in brute force and aggressive expansion. One particularly galling incident involved a local food festival. Sarah had secured a small stall, excited to showcase her creations to a wider audience. Henderson, who had a prime spot at the festival, had deliberately set up his own signage to obscure hers, and his staff had been instructed to loudly announce that real food was only available at the Daily Grind, dismissing Sarah's meticulously crafted cupcakes as, quote, childish trinkets. Sarah had felt a wave of humiliation wash over her, but she'd forced a smile, her hands trembling as she served her customers. She knew her customers appreciated her. Their kind words, their genuine delight in her creations, were her fuel, her motivation to keep going. Despite the constant negativity, Sarah refused to let their words define her. She channeled her frustration, her hurt, and her anger into her work. She spent even longer hours in her kitchen, experimenting with new recipes, refining her existing ones, and ensuring that every single item that left her shop was a testament to her skill and dedication. She focused on building relationships with her customers, remembering their names, their favorite orders, and creating a warm, welcoming atmosphere where they felt valued and appreciated. She started offering baking classes on weekends, sharing her passion and knowledge with others. These classes were small, intimate affairs, and they quickly became incredibly popular, generating a new stream of income and fostering a deeper connection with the community. She also invested in high-quality packaging, making her treats look as beautiful as they tasted. She learned about social media marketing, creating visually appealing posts of her creations that showcased her artistry. She started a small catering service for local events, which also began to gain a reputation for its elegance and deliciousness. Sarah knew she couldn't compete with the Daily Grind on price or volume, but she could compete on quality, on authenticity, and on heart. She believed that people craved genuine connection and handcrafted excellence, and that was exactly what she offered. Her employees, Tom and Maria, were also incredibly supportive. Tom, inspired by Sarah's resilience, started developing his own innovative pastry ideas, and Maria, with her outgoing personality, became the perfect ambassador for the bakery, making every customer feel like a VIP. Sarah's hard work was paying off. Sarah's Sweet Delights was no longer just a small bakery. It was a beloved institution. The original charm of the shop was still there, but it was now enhanced by a growing reputation for excellence. People would travel from neighboring towns just to try her famous lavender scones and her seasonal fruit tarts. The constant mockery from the Daily Grind had, ironically, made her business even more popular. People saw Henderson's bullying tactics as unfair and decided to support Sarah out of principle. Her customer base grew, and with it, her profits. She was able to replace some of her older equipment with brand new, state-of-the-art baking tools, which further improved the quality and efficiency of her operation. She even hired an extra pair of hands, a young pastry chef named Chloe, who was as passionate about baking as Sarah was. The shop was often buzzing with activity, the aroma of baked goods mingling with the cheerful chatter of satisfied customers. Even the local newspaper, which had initially been cautious, now ran a glowing feature on Sarah, highlighting her resilience and her success in the face of adversity. They painted her as a symbol of the small business spirit, a testament to what could be achieved with hard work and dedication. One crisp autumn afternoon, Sarah was walking home, her mind already buzzing with ideas for the upcoming holiday season. She passed by the old, slightly dilapidated building that stood directly beside her bakery, sandwiched between her shop and the daily grind. It had been vacant for years, a forgotten relic of a bygone era, its windows dusty and its paint peeling. Sarah had always found it a bit sad, a wasted space in such a prime location. As she passed, she noticed a for sale sign hammered into the overgrown lawn. It was a small, faded sign, almost hidden by weeds, but it was there. A flicker of an idea, a seed of a thought, began to sprout in her mind. She stopped, her heart giving a little leap. The property. The land. It was for sale. The implications of this realization began to dawn on her, slowly at first, then with a rush of exhilarating possibility. She knew that piece of land, its size, its strategic location, right between her dream and Henderson's empire. She thought about the constant taunts, the condescending laughter, the deliberate attempts to undermine her. She thought about how Henderson and his cronies always seemed to have so much space, so much room to expand, while she was confined to her little shop. They had practically everything. But they didn't have that. Not yet. Sarah stood there for a long time, the for sale sign seared into her vision. The wheels in her mind were spinning furiously. She considered the financial situation of Sarah's sweet delights. While profits had been steadily increasing, she knew that purchasing a commercial property, especially one adjacent to a well-established business like the daily grind, would require a significant investment. She'd been diligently saving, reinvesting most of her profits back into the business, upgrading equipment, and building up a healthy reserve. But this was a different league altogether. She'd always operated with a degree of caution, never wanting to overextend herself. However, the thought of owning that land, of having the power to control what happened there, was incredibly tempting. It was an opportunity she hadn't dared to dream of. She imagined the possibilities, the sheer audacity of it. She saw herself transforming that neglected space into something magnificent, something that would directly challenge the dominance of the daily grind. She pictured a grand, new establishment, a true rival to Henderson's empire, built right next to him, on land he surely believed was out of her reach. The idea was so bold, so daring, that it sent a shiver of excitement down her spine. She knew Henderson would never see it coming. He'd always underestimated her, always dismissed her as a joke. This was her chance to prove him spectacularly wrong. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Sarah discreetly contacted a real estate agent, a trusted individual known for her discretion. She wanted to explore the possibility of acquiring the property without alerting Henderson or his team. She spent her evenings poring over architectural magazines and online design platforms, gathering inspiration. She met with a contractor, a quiet, competent man named David, whom she'd worked with before on some of the bakery's renovations. She didn't reveal her full intentions to him yet, but she discussed general renovation possibilities, structural assessments, and potential building costs for a large commercial space. She wanted to have a solid understanding of what was feasible and what the potential investment would entail. She carefully reviewed her business accounts, calculating exactly how much she could realistically afford to spend. It meant making some difficult decisions. She decided to postpone a planned expansion of her catering operations and put a hold on purchasing some of the more luxurious display cases she'd been eyeing for the bakery. Every penny counted. She also started talking to her bank, exploring loan options, and preparing herself for the financial commitment. She was determined to make this happen. She knew that if Henderson found out she was even considering buying the property, he would likely try to swoop in and buy it himself, just to spite her. Secrecy was paramount. Sarah's clandestine efforts were paying off. She had managed to secure the financing needed to make a substantial offer on the property. The real estate agent, impressed by Sarah's clear vision and financial preparedness, worked diligently to present her offer to the seller. The seller, an elderly gentleman who was eager to unload the property he no longer had any use for, was delighted with Sarah's offer. It was generous, and more importantly, it was a clean, straightforward deal. He didn't want any complications. He didn't care about the neighboring businesses. He just wanted to sell his property quickly and efficiently. The negotiations were swift, and within a few weeks, the deal was closed. Sarah, the owner of Sarah's Sweet Delights, was now the proud owner of the property nestled between her dream and the arrogant empire of the daily grind. She signed the papers with a sense of quiet triumph, a thrill coursing through her veins. The deed was hers. She held it in her hands, a tangible symbol of her growing power and her unwavering resolve. She glanced over at the daily grind, at the familiar garish signage, and a small, satisfied smile played on her lips. They had no idea. They were still laughing, still mocking, still blissfully unaware of the storm that was brewing right next door. Sarah knew that the real work was just beginning, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a profound sense of anticipation, a giddy excitement for what was to come. The scent of cinnamon and ambition filled the air. The ink on the deed was barely dry, but Sarah already felt the weight of it, a delicious burden of potential. She'd spent years kneading dough, perfecting recipes, and absorbing every condescending chuckle from next door. Now she owned the ground they stood on, the very space they'd so readily dismissed as irrelevant. Her bakery, Sarah's Sweet Delights, was a testament to her passion, a delicate dance of butter and sugar that had defied their scorn. But this new acquisition was a declaration. It was a statement etched in brick and mortar, a promise of a future they'd never envisioned. The building itself was a relic, a faded echo of a time when this part of town held a different kind of charm. Its facade was peeling, its windows boarded up, a forlorn sentinel guarding the space between Sarah's vibrant bakery and the garish beacon of the daily grind. Henderson and his cronies, in their unwavering arrogance, had likely seen it as just another piece of forgotten real estate, too insignificant to warrant their attention. And that was precisely why Sarah had bought it. Her initial plan, meticulously crafted in countless late-night sessions fueled by lukewarm coffee and sheer grit, was a daring one. She wasn't aiming for a mere expansion of her bakery. No, that would be too predictable, too easily swallowed by Henderson's monolithic presence. Sarah envisioned something grander, something that would directly challenge the very foundation of his empire. She wanted to create a rival, a culinary powerhouse that would stand shoulder to shoulder with and ultimately eclipse the daily grind. The first step was demolition. With Henderson still blissfully unaware, Sarah hired a discreet demolition crew, their trucks arriving under the cover of pre-dawn darkness. The sound of machinery, the crunch of plaster and brick, was music to her ears. It was the sound of erasure, of making way for something new, something stronger. She stood on the sidewalk, the crisp autumn air biting at her cheeks, watching as the old building crumbled, piece by piece. Her employees, Tom and Maria, stood beside her, their faces alight with a mixture of awe and excitement. Chloe, the young pastry chef she'd hired, clutched a notepad, already sketching out ideas for the new space. Even the loyal customers, who had gathered to witness the spectacle, clapped and cheered, their support a powerful affirmation. As the dust settled, revealing a vacant lot, Sarah turned to David, the contractor. "We're building from the ground up, David," she said, her voice firm and resolute. "Something that will make them remember why they underestimated me." David, a man of few words but immense skill, nodded. "What are we thinking, Sarah? A grand cafe? A full-service restaurant?" Quote. Sarah's eyes sparkled. "Both, and more. We'll have a state-of-the-art bakery, twice the size of my current one, showcasing all my signature items and new creations. Then a sophisticated coffee shop, but not just any coffee shop. We'll focus on single-origin beans, ethically sourced, expertly roasted, and a dining area, a place where people can come for breakfast, lunch, and even early dinner. Think artisanal sandwiches, fresh salads, and of course, a dessert menu that will make their eyes water." She outlined her vision with a feverish energy. She wanted the new establishment to be a stark contrast to the daily grind. Where Henderson's place was loud, garish, and impersonal, hers would be elegant, inviting, and deeply rooted in quality. Natural materials, warm lighting, comfortable seating, a sanctuary for discerning palates. She described a dedicated section for baking classes, a space where she could continue to share her passion and foster the next generation of bakers. And a small, upscale retail section, selling artisanal food products, including her own line of jams, cookies, and perhaps even a signature coffee blend. The next few months were a whirlwind of planning, design, and construction. Sarah became a fixture on the construction site, her apron replaced by a hard hat. She worked tirelessly with David and his team, overseeing every detail, from the plumbing and electrical to the smallest aesthetic choices. She learned about structural engineering, about soundproofing, about the subtle nuances of lighting that could transform a space. Her days were long, often starting before sunrise and ending long after sunset, but she felt more alive than ever. She kept her expansion a closely guarded secret, a clandestine operation waged under the very noses of her rivals. Henderson, predictably, remained oblivious. He'd occasionally glance over at the empty lot with a dismissive shrug, likely assuming it would remain undeveloped for years. His arrogance was her greatest ally. His crew, still engaged in their routine taunts and sneers, never once suspected the scale of the undertaking happening mere feet away. One particularly audacious move involved a late-night delivery of a massive, custom-built espresso machine, a gleaming work of art that dwarfed anything the daily grind possessed. It was carefully maneuvered into the new building, under the shroud of darkness, its presence a silent, potent threat. As construction progressed, Sarah began to strategically leak information, not about the entire project, but about smaller, intriguing aspects. She hosted a few soft openings for select groups: local food bloggers, influential community members, and even a few trusted journalists. These events showcased her existing bakery's offerings and hinted at exciting new ventures on the horizon, without revealing the full scope of her ambition. The lavender scones, of course, were a guaranteed hit, their delicate aroma and exquisite taste serving as a potent preview of the culinary delights to come. The buzz began to build. Whispers of a new, high-end establishment opening next to the daily grind started to circulate. People were intrigued. They knew Sarah's talent, her dedication. They had seen her persevere, seen her artistry bloom in her small shop. The idea of her creating something on a larger scale was exciting, a promise of something fresh and sophisticated in their town. Henderson, when he finally heard the murmurings, dismissed them with his usual bluster. "A rival? Next to us? Don't make me laugh," he'd bellow to anyone who would listen. "She's still playing with dollhouses. Whatever she's planning, it won't last. We're the kings of this town, and we always will be." His employees echoed his sentiments, their mockery laced with a growing unease they refused to acknowledge. Sarah, meanwhile, was preparing her team. Tom, her young baker, was eager to take on the challenges of a larger kitchen, his creativity already overflowing with new pastry ideas. Maria, her ever-charismatic cashier, was being trained to manage the front of the new coffee shop, her warmth and genuine hospitality perfectly suited to creating a welcoming atmosphere. Chloe, the ambitious pastry chef, was already developing an entirely new dessert menu, her innovative flavors and elegant presentations promising to redefine the town's sweet offerings. Sarah even brought in a seasoned barista, a quiet artist named Liam, who possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of coffee and a passion for its craft. The grand opening was set for the spring, a deliberate choice to coincide with the town's annual street fair. Sarah wanted her new establishment, which she decided to name the Gilded Spoon, to be the centerpiece of the event. The name itself was a nod to the exquisite quality she aimed to provide, a subtle jab at Henderson's mass-produced fare. As the final touches were being applied, Sarah stood on the threshold of the Gilded Spoon. It was a magnificent space. The bakery, a gleaming testament to her artistry, was filled with state-of-the-art equipment. The coffee shop exuded a cozy sophistication, with plush seating and the enticing aroma of freshly ground beans. The dining area was elegant, bathed in soft light, promising an experience far removed from the hurried atmosphere of the daily grind. The day of the grand opening arrived, and the town turned out in droves. A palpable excitement filled the air, a stark contrast to the usual humdrum of the street. Sarah, dressed in a custom-made outfit that was both stylish and practical, stood at the entrance, a radiant smile gracing her lips. The doors swung open, and the crowd surged in. The scent of cinnamon, lavender, and rich coffee wafted through the air, mingling with the excited chatter of the patrons. They marveled at the sheer scale of the place, at the exquisite craftsmanship evident in every detail. They savored the lavender scones, the rich dark chocolate croissants, and the vibrant fruit tarts, their faces lighting up with delight. Liam's expertly crafted lattes and cappuccinos were met with gasps of appreciation. The lunch menu, featuring artisanal sandwiches on freshly baked bread and vibrant, seasonal salads, was an instant hit. And then they saw him. Mr. Henderson, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror, stood at the edge of the crowd, his usual smug smirk replaced by a look of utter shock. His employees, a small contingent of his most arrogant staff, clustered around him, their expressions mirroring his astonishment. They had clearly been forced to witness the spectacle, drawn by an unwilling curiosity. Henderson's booming voice, usually so self-assured, was reduced to a strangled grunt. What is this?" he stammered, pointing a trembling finger at the sprawling establishment. Sarah, her gaze meeting his across the crowded space, offered a small, triumphant smile. "This, Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice clear and carrying through the sudden hush that had fallen over the crowd, "is the culmination of a dream, and a little something I built on the land you thought was beneath you." The crowd erupted in cheers, a wave of support that washed over Sarah, reinforcing her victory. Henderson, his face turning a shade of puce that rivaled the neon of his own sign, looked utterly defeated. He had spent years underestimating her, dismissing her as a joke, and in doing so had allowed her to build an empire right under his nose. The next few weeks were a testament to Sarah's foresight and the power of her vision. The Gilded Spoon became the talk of the town, and then the region. People flocked to it, drawn by the exquisite food, the sophisticated ambiance, and the captivating story of its owner. The line outside the Gilded Spoon often snaked down the block, a stark contrast to the dwindling customer base at the Daily Grind. Henderson's attempts to fight back were pathetic. He tried to launch a new line of artisanal pastries, but they were clumsy imitations, lacking the soul and finesse of Sarah's creations. He slashed his prices, a desperate tactic that only served to highlight the inferior quality of his offerings. His taunts, once sharp and effective, now sounded hollow and desperate, a pathetic whimper against the roaring success of the Gilded Spoon. Sarah, however, remained gracious. She didn't gloat or retaliate. She simply focused on her business, on continuing to innovate, to delight her customers, and to build upon her success. She expanded her baking classes, even offering advanced workshops that attracted aspiring bakers from far and wide. She launched a successful catering service for larger events, her elegant creations becoming highly sought after. The Gilded Spoon wasn't just a rival to the Daily Grind, it was a culinary destination in its own right. Tom had become Sarah's head baker, his creativity flourishing under her guidance. Maria managed the front of house with an unparalleled charm, ensuring every customer felt like a cherished guest. Chloe's dessert menu continued to evolve, each creation a masterpiece of flavor and artistry. Liam, the quiet barista, had cultivated a loyal following for his meticulously brewed coffees. One evening, as Sarah stood on the balcony of her new establishment, overlooking the now dimly lit The Daily Grind, she felt a profound sense of satisfaction. The scent of cinnamon and ambition still filled the air, but now it was mingled with the sweet aroma of hard-won victory. They had thought her business was a joke. They had laughed. They had mocked. They had tried to break her spirit. But Sarah had not only survived, she had thrived. She had taken their ridicule and forged it into the bedrock of her own empire. A Gilded Spoon that had served them a heaping portion of humble pie. The laughter had stopped, replaced by the quiet hum of success and the even sweeter sound of retribution.